What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Conflicts of Interest, and here we are, Will, with episode 100. How you doing today,
Yeah,
buddy? I mean,
good
it's
man.
been
We made it.
yeah, it's been quite about 8 months now of us doing this video version of the podcast now, and boy, has it
That's right.
been great. And dude, we could do a whole episode on all the like false narratives from the mainstream media that they've gotten wrong and we've gotten right. Like, go back and do a
That's
show
right.
just on like the Afghan bounty scandals or Brian Sitnick
Yeah.
or any of the others. And I mean, we could just brag about how great we've been the whole time. But rather than doing that for this show, we have a fantastic interview for y'all today. Me and Will already recorded it, so we know it's great. We know everybody's going to love it. We are interviewing the great Scott Horton, author of Fool's Errand and now Enough Already. He's the editorial director of Antiwar.com. He's the boss at the Libertarian Institute. And of course, he's the host of the Scott Horton Show, which now has over 5,500 episodes. And a big part of why me and Will are so good on foreign policy is because we probably listened to a good chunk of those episodes. I don't want to say I've listened to over half, but I bet it's pretty close. So, Will,
Yeah.
we should get to this episode pretty quick, but just remind people that they could support the show by donating. We have pages at Patreon and Subscribestar, and links to Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash wallets in the show notes page. If you don't want to donate, can't donate, you could support the show for free just by sharing it. It's up pretty much anywhere you could find podcasts and on all of our social media accounts, Facebook, MeWe, Twitter. So be sure to like those pages and share the show, especially this episode with Scott. We're talking about Afghanistan, Ukraine, and just as Scott always does, he weaves the entire terror war together and gets into all the different nuances and all the terrible things the warmongers have been doing the past couple of decades. So, Will, let's just thank our sponsor, which has pretty much been with us since the beginning of the show as well. Paloma
Yeah.
Verde. It's a great partnership. I mean, their logo's a green dove, our logo's the yellow dove. It's all about peace. Theirs is about healing and health. You know, whether it's your mental health, physical health. Go over to the Green Dove Paloma Verde store.com and get your CBD products. Will, tell them about the ed strats that you like.
Yeah. I like the particularly I like the melatonin soft gels. Those are, help me with my insomnia issues and just winding down at night. But then also if you want like the heavier dose, they also have these liquid like tinctures that I enjoy a lot too. So yeah, definitely stop by palomaverdestore.com and use the promo code PEACE to get 25% off your order.
Yeah, and it also helps out the show. So, Will, with that, let's get into our 100th episode interview here with Scott, and we'll just start rolling it. Hey, Scott, how's it going, man?
It's
Welcome
going
back to
great.
the
Hey,
show.
congratulations to you guys for your 100th episode. I love your show. It's the best show. It's better than mine by far.
Well, thanks so much, Scott.
And I know if I get hit by a
Thanks,
bus,
and
the libertarian movement is holding down the anti-war position, no matter what. I don't need to be around.
Well, hell yeah, man.
Thanks, and
Thank you for
of
coming on.
course, it's hosted at the Institute, and Will's got some of the Institute swag on right now. He's got
Right.
got the Libertarian Institute sweater. We also got I got my copy right here, signed copy of Enough Already, your latest book. I believe people could still get a signed copy if they go to the Institute and donate some money. So think about doing that, and we'll certainly be asking Scott some questions today about his book, Enough Already. But Scott, I want to start off with I guess probably the biggest foreign policy news right now, and that is Biden's announcement that something's supposed to happen on 9/11, whether that's all troops being out of Afghanistan or the Afghan war actually ending with contractors, troops, and airstrikes ending. So, what do you think? Are we approaching here? Are we within, let's say, 6 months of the end of the Afghan war?
Well, look, I mean, I think, yeah, it's not going to happen. I mean, I'm not trying to like carve out I'm the most cynical and disbelieving of all position here or anything like that. I mean, I'm trying to find reasons to believe. I'm trying to see that. I mean, look for aspects where there really is a conflict inside the state about how far they want to go with this stuff, and just how far it'll be implemented and what it all means. And so, obviously you can't take it at face value. The most important thing to me off the bat, and this is just amazing me, the media, the way the media can control the debates about these things is just such an incredible, like, interesting thing on its own to me. I remember learning in high school about how the media was able to make people think that drug abuse was the worst problem in America, just with 2 or 3 weeks of news specials about the Crips and the Bloods and crack cocaine and whatever. And all of a sudden, they got the whole society in a panic over this stuff. And then they kind of dropped it and changed the subject back to the Ayatollah or whatever it was. And then interest in the subject completely dropped them through the floor again. But they got their, Biden written laws through and all of the rest of this stuff based on this panic that they had just drummed up with just a few, bits of hype. And they do this thing. I mean, look at the way that they have introduced this whole subject of Biden's withdrawal from Afghanistan. You would not know that we had a withdrawal deal to leave on May the 1st. They just completely omit that. But now we're supposed to believe that Biden is going to leave without a deal where he canceled the deal that we actually had to leave. Well, that doesn't really sound right. You know what I mean? It looks to me more like instead of Biden deciding to finally wrap up this war and end this war, that what really happened was the generals rolled him just the exact same way they'd rolled Trump and rolled Obama before him and said, you can't leave by May 1st. You got to take the time between now and the middle of April to decide. And then, of course, it'll be too late to decide to stick with the deal. And we're going to kick the can down the road. And then why September 11th? Who came up with that? It seems like just from a politics point of view, I mean, just think about what Tom Cotton and Lindsey Graham and all these people are going to say, that we're picking the 20th anniversary of this horrible attack on our country to surrender to the bad guys and give the whole field over to them and all of these things. Not that it was the Taliban who attacked us, but that's the narrative, that we're not going to be there. And so then that sets the stage perfectly for Biden to say, well, we're not really withdrawing. We're just going to withdraw the infantry, the last of the Marines, I guess. I don't know. But we'll leave some Rangers and some Delta and a lot of contractors. And maybe we can station them in Tajikistan. And even Biden has been floating for right about a year now since, last spring in the campaign, that I know what we'll do. Maybe we'll just put all our troops and move and have a new base in Pakistan. So then we can attack across the border from Pakistan into Afghanistan because the safe haven myth rules forever. And we cannot ever leave anywhere where we are because then Al-Qaeda will be there and will be able to use that space to attack us. Even though America is still fighting on the side of Al-Qaeda in Yemen and in Syria right now, essentially has an alliance. We have an alliance with the Turks protecting Al-Qaeda forces in the Idlib province, which is in the Levant. That's not even Mesopotamia. That's adjacent right there, just a hop, skip, and a jump from the Mediterranean Sea now. And that's fine, though. Those are moderates. We're going to have a brand new propaganda campaign about how Abu Muhammad al-Jolani, the Zarqawi of Syria, ain't really so bad after all. And so at the same time that we can never, ever, ever leave Afghanistan, and we have to leave special operations forces and contractors and CIA spies. And, of course, I know you guys have read Fool's Errand, and there's all kinds of there's been great reporting about this here and there throughout the years of these CIA death squads called counterterrorism pursuit teams of completely lawless people working for quote unquote Afghan intelligence. And they're essentially sectarian death squads, right? They get Tajiks to go out and murder Pashtuns. And then they got Pashtuns to go out and murder Tajiks and all these things. It's crazy. And Hazaras too, all caught up in this. And, in fact, I'm not the biggest fan of The Intercept, but they've published quite a few different pieces by various writers. This one lady, I'm so sorry, I forget her name. I think her last name was Jong. I forget her first name. Was it May? Yeah, May Jong. And then also I just interviewed this Australian guy. Man, I got what Biden's got. I just talked with this guy a couple of weeks ago. So Quilty, Andrew Quilty, who wrote this great thing about the same thing. It's essentially CIA death squads running, and they're just killing innocent people. They're not accomplishing anything. But I guess so. Here's the point to get to is that, well, so what's going to happen to Kabul, right? The Taliban rules a huge amount of the country. As I said in my book 4 years ago, what year is it? Almost 4 years ago now, that look, the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, that ain't a joke. That is not, a highfalutin name for a militia group. They really are the government of at least half the country, in the daytime, and more than that at night. And the only reason that they don't just walk right in and seize the provincial capitals in Helmand province and in Kandahar and, some of the others, I don't know how much influence they have in some of these. Whatever influence they have, usually it's in just co-opting the government that the U.S. has created there rather than overthrowing it. But they don't want to have large concentrations of infantry for B-1 bombers to come by and decimate. So they're essentially waiting for the Americans to be gone to really consolidate a state. But then, look, what's going to happen in Kandahar City and in Lashkar Gah? They're going to be ruled by the Taliban is what's going to happen within a very short amount of time after the Americans are not there to disincentivize that. And many more places. Kunduz up in the north is a heavily Pashtun area and a place where the Taliban have had a lot of influence for a very long time. And then, of course, what about Kabul and the capital city, which, the Afghan Taliban's old friends in Hizb Islami are already inside the gates, although Hekmatyar has apparently been relatively calm since then. But, you have severe enemies, total enemies of the Taliban, like General Rashid Dostum, who is now supposedly the marshal of the Afghan army and the Afghan National Army, their highest position. This is the former defense minister and vice president who used to be a communist in the Russian-backed, Soviet-backed army back on the other side of the war in the 1980s, right, and is a war criminal and butcher and murderer and rapist. And so, man, there's a lot of unresolved things. America has been essentially propping up the power of people who don't have that much power in the natural marketplace of things around there. And so there's a big correction coming in terms of how much influence they have over the country. And I have no idea whether the what has been called the Afghan national government can really work out a peace deal with the Taliban where they can share power. The Americans were talking about, this really sounds like throwing in the towel to me. I don't know. Maybe we'll just completely throw out everything we've done over the last 20 years and we'll create a new bicameral legislature and the Taliban will completely control one house. And then we'll set up another house of the other guys and try to come up with, they're just throwing darts now. They don't know what the hell they're going to do. And they're facing potentially a slaughter in Kabul. And if you listen to the Hawks, there's a lot of really stupid arguments going around, but some of the arguments are not that stupid. There are reasonable arguments on the face of it, which is when we go, there's hell to pay for the people that we've been trying to protect all this time. Well, that's really true. But the only answer, the real reasonable answer to that is that's also true 10 years from now and 15 and 20 years from now if we want to continue on like this. And so at some point, it has to be their problem and not ours. And it's the Americans who put them in that position, and that sucks. But it has not worked. What are you going to do? Argue that, well, we just need one more surge to reverse all the Taliban's gains of the last 10 years? No. So what are we talking about?
I've heard Hawks explicitly say, I think Brett Stevens made this point that, look, Scott, it's only about 20 Americans a year that are going to be killed in that war. And so we could maintain what they call maintain the gains that we've made in that country. I saw Jean Shaheen, the senator, tweeting about women's rights. We could protect those women's rights, and it only costs us about 20, Americans a year, and that's the argument that I'm seeing some people make at this point.
Yeah. Michael O'Hanlon has been saying that for a long time, and I saw where Brett Stevens like, come on, we lose more than that in training accidents every year. So, at this point, what difference does it make, essentially? But he also, he makes a lot of unsupported claims in there. And that's not even the worst part of that essay, which is all about we ought to fall for bin Laden's trap harder and worse because of what an idiot Brett Stevens is. But, at this part of it, that was the worst part of the whole article. But here he's just taking for granted that, oh, look, all it takes is a little bit of air power to keep the Taliban from taking over the country. Well, I mean, not necessarily. There's a correlation there, but not necessarily full causation. And if the Taliban decides we completely broke the deal and we really mean to break the deal and keep the Bagram air base, then we don't know what that's going to look like when they go back to war. But American air power might not be able to do anything about it if they want to walk right into Kabul rather than marching right into Kabul. You know what I mean? I don't know. And they don't even need a Trojan horse, right? They could just send 25 guys every night for a couple of months, and then that's it. They own the town. Or, you know what I mean? I don't know. It's not difficult at this point. There's nobody to stop them. And so, they're terrified of this fall of Saigon moment, and yet they can't admit to themselves. They picked a fight they never should have picked. Mullah Omar and his government surrendered. And Hamid Karzai, for all his faults, he was from the Papalzai tribe from Kandahar, and his father was an important tribal leader. And so he had enough, credibility that Mullah Omar said, we recognize the new government as Islamic and legitimate. And so, geez, should have been us, but now that it's you guys, fine, let's not fight anymore. And after all, their infantry had been J-damned off the face of the damned earth. So what were they going to do about it? It was over for them. And so, but Mullah Omar didn't say, like, come on, let's lead a guerrilla fight. He said, no, let's all surrender and work with the new regime. And the Americans refused to do that. They needed somebody to fight. And so they kept fighting and fighting this whole time. They made enemies out of their old friends Hekmatyar and Haqqani and the Afghan Taliban, who were also their friends. Bill Clinton had helped put them in power back in the 1990s. And then they fought them this whole time and then lost anyway. Back in 2016, they brought Hekmatyar back in from the cold at no cost whatsoever, which, fine, what are you going to do? It's better than worse solutions than that. But essentially, he won. The same guy that brags that he took CIA money and then helped bin Laden escape anyway. Ha, ha, ha. And the Afghan Taliban rules the place. And so, the Hawks, they just don't have any reasonable arguments where they're willing to take on all of these truths. That, in fact, there's this lady named Ashley Jackson, and I never could get her on the show. I had my guy was trying to get her on the show back a couple of years ago, and she had written this great investigative study. She'd gone all over Afghanistan writing about this thing. And she said that ever since the death of Massoud and the takeover by Hakunzada, I forgot how to say his entire name. Is it Najibullah Hakunzada became the new Taliban leader. And then at that time, he just said that, you know what? We don't have to burn down every school. We will just be in charge of hiring all the teachers, and we will be the school board. And we don't have to kill every mayor and police chief. We'll just make sure our guy is the mayor and the police chief. So the Americans want to foist this form of government on the country, such as they have. Fine, we'll just rule it all. And they also made this strategic decision that let's drop all the sectarianism and let's just stick with Islam. And so we don't care if you guys even are Hazaras who are Shiites. And we don't care if you guys are Tajiks or Uzbeks. If you guys want to deal, or whatever, Turkmen and whatever other minorities there, if you guys want to deal with us rather than deal with them, then cool. And so they opened their door wider to letting in non-Pashtuns into the leadership, even positions of the Taliban, especially in the north and the west of the country. And so they're just making gains like crazy. Like they got smart. They stopped being mad and they started being strategic about how to do this. And they just took fine. Why go up against these institutions? Why sack Kabul when we could walk right in the door? Same thing with every mayor's office and every police chief's office and every school superintendent's office. Is we'll just walk in and be like, look, this is our office now. We're in charge now, and you guys don't want to fight us because you know how we are. And then they just go, oh, yeah, you know what? You are the superintendent of the school board now. Bye, I resign. And so don't kill me. And then that's it. They just took it over. They didn't blow the thing up. They just took possession of it. And so And that's of whatever minimal state apparatus the Americans had succeeded in creating over all that time. And so look, aim is up for years. You know what, man? Back during the surge, you know, what year was it? 2010 or 2011, when William S. Lind wrote this piece. Okay, I'll concede maybe 12 at the latest, but I think earlier. And Lind said, oh, look, it's the operational art. And I don't even understand what the hell this means, but that's your keywords anyway. He says, between tactics and strategy is the operational art of implementing your policy. And in this case, the Taliban's operational art of implementing their strategy with their tactics is infiltrating the Afghan security forces and then massacring the people inside, killing them in their barracks at night. The green on green attacks or green on blue attacks, where and they don't even need real Taliban to go and infiltrate. They can just win a guy over. Hey, you're one of the new Afghan cops. Come on, man, be a patriot and kill these other traitors and we'll make you a deal. And they go, okay. And this happened over and over again. So here, it was a stupid strategy. What it never worked anyway. But Lind is saying, okay, so here's your strategy, Petraeus. You're going to tamp down the bad guys at the same time you're building up this really powerful and stable and productive and efficient Afghan National Army. And they're going to continue to do the job and pick up where we left off. And the Taliban said, okay, well, no, you're not, because we're just going to kill your guys from the inside. And when you send your guys to train our guys, we're going to kill your guys. And then so the Americans stopped training them because who the hell wants to be shot in the back? And then the Afghan cops and Afghan army guys are dying from insider attacks inside their own barracks. Nobody's even throwing a grenade over the wall. They're already inside the wall. And, you know, when they went back in the early Trump years in 2017, the New York Times ran a piece about the Marines back in the Helmand province, and they're training local Afghan forces, and they have these guardian angels or Marine snipers up in the watchtowers who have their crosshairs on the back of all of the Afghan trainees that their comrade Rangers or Marine special operations guys are training down there. And they're the guardian angels, because if these guys make one wrong move and try to kill our guy, then the guardian angels shoot him right in the back and prevent that, hopefully. And that was necessary because it kept happening. And so the only way our Marines could train the local Afghan National Army forces in Helmand was to have other Marines on the other side of them aiming at the back of their heads all day, you know. And then what? This is sustainable? This is going to accomplish what? You know, I show in the book, I quote Colonel G.N. Gentile and Daniel Davis, and I forget the different books that it's on the footnotes in Fool's Errand, that if you go by their numbers, they would need a 500, and this is assuming even the possibility that the Pashtun can be tamed, which is crazy, right? But even presuming their models and metrics for how to win a counterinsurgency campaign against the people of Afghanistan, broadly speaking, you would need 500,000 men for 25 years. That's the equation for number of troops per person until you can change their entire society into the one you want it to be. Well, that's the entire army active force, not just the infantry, but that's like everybody who's in the army, all of them. And for 25 years, in a country the size of Texas, in the middle of landlocked South Central Asia, on the other side of a mountain range from the Indian Ocean, where we got to go through Iran or Russia or Pakistan all the way up through the Khyber Pass. Sorry, flip this around stage left and right here. All the way up through the Khyber Pass to get there. In this country, people have already finished ejecting us. We're going to start that over again? That's why all Brett Stevens can say is, well, no, we'll just keep the status quo. No, you can't. Like, the Taliban don't have a say in that. And look, I'm not predicting this, but it's very possible. Why not? You could have a situation in, say, a few weeks where the Taliban tell Karzai, like, hey, we kind of don't believe you because we read the New York Times and it says you're keeping mercenaries and spies and death squads and killers to stay in our country. And so we really mean it. And to show you that, welcome to the Tet Offensive, right? And they could take on, and they could not even touch Bagram Air Base, right? But they could go after, even if they wanted to be smart in terms of public relations and avoid directly killing Americans, they could decimate Afghan army and Afghan police forces all over the country over the weekend. And then what are we going to do? And they could really, I think, bring a lot of power to bear that they have been saving up over the last year and a half of ceasefire as they've been negotiating this peace with the U.S. And they've been pretty hard on the Afghan National Security Forces all along anyway. But if the Americans want to really, really break the deal, and they want to really, really make a statement about that, what are the Americans going to do to help the ANA at that point? You know, and again, the Tet Offensive was not the massive mechanized divisions or massive infantry divisions rolling in and taking territory. For people who don't know that history, it was still guerrilla strikes and then melt away all over the country. In fact, if you listen to the American Hawks tell the story of the history of that battle, the Americans won the Tet Offensive. We didn't lose a single battle. They had to withdraw. Well, the point was that they were able to attack X number of bases all across the South at the same time in a way that completely contradicted the narrative that the Americans were winning and everything was fine over there, which clearly was not. So you could have something like that. And frankly, they could attack the Americans. Now, Daniel Davis assures me that there's so much firepower at the Bagram Air Base that as long as the Americans are there and have access to all those guns, there's no way the largest Taliban land force could ever take that fort. That just forget it. But how about everything short of that? I mean, I don't know. And I'll take him on his word on that, assuming that they have enough men to fly enough drones and man enough machine guns and whatever else it is, mostly directing aircraft with large bombs, I guess, to prevent something like that from happening. But as I say, I think they could just walk right into Kabul. What's stopping them at this point from just walking in and saying, okay, the parliament's closed. This is ours now. What are you going to do about that? And then just doing that. I don't know. I mean, maybe it would be a hell of a fight. Maybe it would be, but I kind of doubt it.
Yeah. Scott, you know, I agree with you. You say, like, you're not trying to be the most cynical, the biggest naysayer about, like, whether we're really getting out of there by September 11th. But I don't know. I'm looking at some of the stuff they're talking about doing. They want to, like, arrange a new election. They want to rewrite the Constitution. They have this huge. They've given themselves a very tall order to fulfill there. And I'm wondering, like, does that seem to you just like, is that going to just become mission creep again and just another excuse to stay, or
yes,
what's your read on that?
Yeah. I mean, look, if we can't withdraw when we have a deal, then we're not going to withdraw when we don't have a deal.
Right. Yeah.
And I mean, it's not like they said to the Taliban, there's no indication that I know of that they said to the Taliban, look, I know it really sucks that we're extending 6 months, but we really, really, really do mean it, though, that at the end of the 6 months we're going. So it's cool. Please accept it. It's just politics in D.C. You got to understand. I don't even think they tried that. I think they're just like, yeah, this is what we're doing now. And this is going to be fine. And the deal never existed. We don't know what you're talking about. What deal? We are leaving because Biden decided we're leaving, and we're leaving by September because Biden decided that. But to me, I mean, I think that represents the Pentagon winning over him. And not winning him over, but winning over him. And that I have no idea why it should be that in 6 months that he should be so ornery as to say, no, I really, really meant it. And CIA and Delta Force and Navy SEALs and 75th Rangers and everybody, whatever, everybody goes and forget it. And we're not even worried. We'll just tell the Taliban, don't let Al-Qaeda come back in any meaningful way, or we'll carpet bomb Kabul or something. I don't know. And I don't know. I don't see it. What's he going to do? The mission all along has been to make it somebody else's problem. Bush said it outright in terms of Iraq. Oh, Iraq, that'll be for other presidents to decide. What? Huh? It was the same thing. I saw where Obama, somebody tagged me on Twitter and said, imagine being this guy. And it was Barack Obama saying, I support Joe Biden's decision to end the war in Afghanistan. Like, oh, man, are you the guy who swore that we'd have all of our troops out by 2014? Uh, and I forget now if it was supposed to be by the end of 2013 or by the end of 2014. But either way, that was a hell of a long time ago now. And they continue to roll him. I chronicle that in the book too, how Obama just gave in over and over and over again. That, well, we're going to bring it down to 4,000. No, okay, we'll only bring it down to 8. But then we're going to bring it down to 4 in another 3 months. And then, yeah, no, we're not. We're going to keep it at 8. And then whatever it is. And they just kick the can down the road and kick the can down the road. And most of the time, nobody cares either way. So, you know, I don't know. I don't know what the Taliban's going to do, man. I mean, they're bastards. I'm not saying that. But in terms of protecting their own interests, they seem rational. And they're pretty coy about it. If you look at the statement on their website, they say that, look, I mean, in theory, I forgot exactly the words. But they say something like, in theory, hypothetically, that's what it was. In principle, you understand that anything that happens now that is negative would be on the fault of those of you who've broken the deal, not on the fault of those of us who might be doing a terrible, violent thing to you about it. So, but they're being kind of coy, and they're trying to still leave the Americans an escape hatch. Right? They're not trying to say we want to go back to war here. They're trying to say, come on, guys, you don't want to go back to war here. We don't want to go back to war. Don't make us go back to war, but we will go back to war. The Taliban's position has never changed this whole time, which is get out. All foreign troops out. You can't stay. And they said it once, they said it 1,000 times, and they never changed it, and they always swore we'll never change it. That's our demand. Imagine Texans demanding any less from an occupying army. Like, look, you guys want a peace deal where you withdraw in 9 months or 15 months? All right, but we're holding you to it, and we still have rifles. I mean, we're not going to, like, at some point, they're just going to give up and go, you know what, you guys can stay and be our overlords. What the hell? Yeah, I kind of think that ship has sailed a long time ago.
Yeah. Scott, I want to change subjects a little bit and talk about one of the more heated places recently, Ukraine. I know you just interviewed Ray McGovern, and Ray had some, I guess, good news for a change. Usually when I listen to your show, I don't walk away feeling a little bit better about the world, but Ray said that they had turned the heat down a little bit on the tensions in Ukraine, but I mean, is it just not crazy to you? Because you've seen this far more times than I have, where you have Biden now going back to this policy where we're more escalating in Ukraine and talking about Ukraine was talking about coming into NATO and giving all these affirmations to Zelensky in Ukraine. Just how crazy is this policy, and how is it that Biden could repeat it after seeing this blow up in his face, in 2014 in Ukraine, but also what happened to George Bush in 2008 in Georgia?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, man, especially I like the way you frame it about Biden himself here, right? Because he's not exactly just a figurehead. And I mean, he is in the sense that he's so old and senile and dependent on his aides now. That's a real problem in the Ronald Reagan sense, where he's really detached. At the same time, he's been a senator since Nixon. In fact, I forgot if we talked about this before, but I just love this so much, this factoid about the man. His first, and I learned this from Bronco March-Teach, his book, Yesterday's Man, about Biden. His first major act as a new senator when he took office in 1973 was to condemn Nixon for his hasty, precipitous withdrawal from Vietnam.
Of course.
And that's who this guy has been his entire time. But so he's been there this entire time. And you're right that he has had so many opportunities to learn this lesson. I'm glad that you invoke Georgia as one of the ones where he could have learned an important example. And this is where the Bush administration had, I think, sort of unintentionally just, they were talking a lot of smack, but don't read us wrong or anything, but they were kind of read wrong. And Mikhail Saakashvili, the president of Georgia, believed that the Americans would really back him up and face down the Russians or even fight them in a war if he went ahead and tried to seize back these breakaway provinces of Georgia, South Ossetia and Abkhazia. And so what happened was This would have been, I forget if it was early August. I think it was like August 8th of 2008, something like that. They attacked, and the status quo was that there were Russian peacekeepers were there under a deal that had been brokered with our allies in the European Union. And so they were attacked. They were sort of the defense forces there, and they were targeted and killed. And Putin sent troops over and under the Caucasus Mountains. They have tunnels under the Caucasus Mountains. And they came back and, of course, pushed the Georgian forces back. And then even across the line, some, although they didn't keep it. And they've guaranteed, the independence of South Ossetia and Abkhazia from Georgia. Anyway, I don't know about their independence overall. I'm sure they've really increased Russian influence in both of those places since then. As the result of this. But the Americans, Bush backed down and didn't do anything. And we know from two different sources. One is Ron Suskind, and I forget now, I'm sorry, who was the other footnote for this. I used to know this, who was the other source that reported essentially the same story, that at the National Security Council meeting of the principals, that Cheney said, look, I think we should hit these Russian forces coming under the Caucasus Mountains in these tunnels and close the tunnels. And Bush said, all right, who agrees with Vice that we should attack the Russians? And nobody raised their hand. And of course, Stephen Hadley and the rest of the National Security Group at that point weren't going to let anything like that happen. And so they dropped it, and that was it. But here's the other important point of that. So that's the story, what happened there. But meanwhile, it was an election year, and you had John McCain versus Barack Obama. And, of course, Joe Biden was running as the vice president at that time. And the narrative was Russian aggression. Russia attacked Georgia. And no one would admit the truth that Georgia had started it by attacking Russian peacekeepers in South Ossetia. Peacekeepers, again, who were there under a deal that had been brokered with the West. And so they just left that part out of it. And they ran with this narrative through August, September, October, and through the election in November of 2008. And it was a major part of it. At one point, this is an important anecdote. I wonder if anybody could find the YouTube of this. I guess so. Yeah, it's in the debate. So, yeah, this will be on the permanent record somewhere, right? It was a debate in, I guess, pardon me, I drank a bunch of Dr. Pepper. I'm pretty sure it would have been in August still, possibly September, but I bet it would have still been in August of 2008. And it's Tom Brokaw from NBC News is hosting the debate between Obama and McCain. And McCain says, Russian aggression, Russian aggression. And at one point, they all exchanged looks such as like, hey, remember earlier backstage when we talked about this? This is essentially what's going on with the body language there. So what we're doing then is we're going to go along with pretending that this is what we believe happened and not challenge the premise on that, right? Okay. And then Obama goes, yeah, well, something's got to be done about Russia, but not as bad as what you want to do or whatever his kind of answer was. But he refused to challenge him on the facts. And then after the election, and would have been, right around the time of Thanksgiving in November, in the last part of the month, the New York Times ran a piece called, yeah, we lied to you about all of that. And it turns out that really it was Georgia that attacked South Ossetia first, which they wouldn't even bother to run an article like that now. They probably wouldn't even bother to run a correction on the lie now. But at that point, they were shamed enough that they finally admitted that, yeah, we really got that wrong for you guys the last few months there and helped make that the official story. But then, sorry, because I'm just rambling, because the real point is, so what does that mean for Joe Biden's brain during all of that? What did he think happened there? He really blamed Putin, or he knew enough to know that, like, come on, man. Bush and McCain's guys had made Saakashvili believe that we would have his back, and maybe not intentionally, I guess. I don't think they really promised him anything, but I don't know. But then, so what did he do? He was one of the prime architects. As they say, he held the Ukraine brief in the Obama government, and he was intimately involved in the coup of 2014, in February 2014. And we know because Victoria Nuland says, F the EU, they're taking too long to do this coup. And what we want to do is push the Germans out of the way. And we're going to go to the UN and get this guy, Robert Sari. And then we're going to use Vice President Biden and get him on the phone and help glue this whole thing together. And we got to midwife it and we got to make it happen and all of this. And so this is the key to why Hunter Biden got the job at Burisma, was because Burisma had been close with the government that the Americans had just overthrown. And so they were worried that they were going to be up on the chopping block now that the new guys were in town, and they had been friends with the old guys. So that was why they hired the vice president's son as like their get out of jail free card, their don't hit me card, you know, because they went ahead and brought their enemy or their possible adversary right onto their team and said, you know, now there's no reason for us to fight, which is probably smart business from their point of view, but was at the kernel of that whole scandal of what was Hunter Biden even doing there. That's what it was, is this gas company was trying to make up for the fact that they had been tight with the government that Biden had just helped overthrow. And then this, of course, led to the crisis, so-called crisis, whatever from your point of view, where the Russians seized the Crimean Peninsula that had really always belonged to them since the 1780s, when we were still under the Articles of Confederation here, and it had only been transferred to Ukraine in the 1950s by Khrushchev because they needed to placate the Communist Party of Ukraine as he was rising to power to replace Stalin after he died. Yeah. But otherwise was something like a supermajority ethnic Russian area with a minority, I guess a significant minority of Ukrainians and Tatars who may have not have preferred to go to Russia. But anyway, I mean, the reality was that the status quo, which was fine, Ukraine can continue to own Crimea, but you got to let us keep our base there, our naval base there. That status quo had held since 1991. The only thing that had changed was the Americans had overthrown the government in Kiev twice in 10 years, and this time explicitly threatened, come on, let's kick them out of the naval base in Sevastopol. Yeah, and so Putin just said no. And Ray McGovern actually had highlighted that Putin had joked. I think I've seen the clip of this too. I think it's where I forget if he's talking to Oliver Stone in this. No, I don't think it's the Oliver Stone thing. I think it's a different clip. Where he's saying, you know, we thought about how nice it would be to go and visit our NATO friends at their new naval base in Sevastopol for the holidays. And we thought that actually, you know what, as nice as that would be, we would prefer if they would be our guests. And they could come and celebrate Christmas with us. Something like that, right? In other words, you can't have my naval base, dude. Let's not fight about this. For a cold-blooded serial killing sociopath, the guy's got a cool temperament, at least, you know, as far as that goes. And then when they seized the peninsula, they didn't kill anybody. And I saw the footage then. I don't know if I didn't download it and save it, but I saw the footage then of 2 shots fired as warning shots over the heads of Ukrainian soldiers, where the Russians advised them politely, honestly, they're like, you guys really should turn around and go the other way instead of messing with us. And the Ukrainians say, you know what? We're withdrawing now. And then that's it. Nobody's killed. And so, you know, for a coup de main, that was pretty good one as far as, you know, and you're not supposed to do that under the international law. But of course, the Americans do it all the time, including overthrowing governments in Kiev, for example, twice in 10 years, but also breaking Kosovo off from Serbia or helping the Israelis colonize the West Bank or whatever it is that they feel like doing. So anyway, and then it also, the coup in Kiev, which again, Biden was, as vice president, was very involved in, led to the people of the eastern Donbas region, Donetsk and Luhansk provinces, and led to whatever forces there seizing the government buildings and saying, well, if you guys can seize government buildings to overthrow our democratically elected leader who won fair and square, according to the EU, that we favor, well, then we can occupy all the government buildings in our district and refuse to recognize the rule of the new coup junta. And yeah, they held elections, but of course, elections that excluded everybody in the East who had voted for the guy they just overthrown. So what kind of election is that? And that's not right, according to them, certainly. And so they said, okay, well, we declare independence from you then. And then the American-backed new government in Kiev declared a war on terrorism and attacked them. And somewhere between 10 and 15,000 people have been killed in this terrible war in the east of Ukraine. And the Russian Special Operations Forces did come across and help the, secessionist side of the movement. But at the same time, they held a referendum, a plebiscite, on whether they wanted to join the Russian Federation or not. And they voted in huge numbers. I don't know what they were, but sound majorities, if not super majorities, to join Russia. And then Putin told them no. Putin did not invade, despite what the New York Times said over and over again, that the Russian army was invading eastern Ukraine. He didn't do that. He sent special operations forces to fight on the side of the people there, for sure. But he did not invade and try to move the border at all. And he rejected the absorption of the province when, of course, he could have done so just by declaring it was so. And it would have been an absolute fait accompli. There's nothing anyone could have done about it if he'd really tried that, presumably. I don't know what they could have tried to do at that point. If he would have really moved his armor and infantry in there, then you can't beat that. That Ukraine can't beat that. And he didn't do that. And so then we've had, since 2015, we've been under, I'm sorry, guys, forgive me, but, and you may know better than me, but I'm almost certain that it's 2015 was when they signed the second Minsk deal that more or less really called a halt to the worst of the violent conflict there. There's been some fighting back and forth ever since that time. Importantly, Angela Merkel from Germany and Francois Hollande from France came to America, to D.C., to meet with Obama, and all reporting was that I saw, and I didn't see anyone contradicting this, that their mission was essentially to politely inform him that we're going to Minsk and we're going to make a deal with Putin and we're going to end this war.
I remember.
And it wasn't, they were informing him politely rather than asking his permission. And they were saying, this is what's going to happen, and we're going to go and do it right now because we want to put an end to this right now. And went and did that. And he apparently told them fine. And then famously, even though Obama's government had backed the overthrow in Kiev, he'd been reluctant to arm the new, military forces under the command of, and completely infiltrated by a bunch of National Socialists of various degrees of outright Hitler worship and genocidal intent. And at one point, of course, Representative Conyers had passed a resolution which everybody just thought, yeah, that sounds fine, right? It banned American training for any Nazis anywhere in the world. And that passed with a voice vote, no problem. Until then the White House got back to leadership, was like, no. And I love this because they could have just ignored it and broke the law, right? It's not like the New York Times is going to rat on them or anything. They just, you know what? We need you guys to repeal that resolution because we actually do want to train these Nazis. And then they did. They repealed the resolution in the next thing. It had officially been passed and signed, and then they went back and undid it so that they could train Nazis. And then when Trump came in, of course, he was supposedly the anti-Ukrainian guy and the pro-Russian guy. But in fact, maybe just to prove how true that wasn't, he went and armed and sent all kinds of weapons and supplies to the Ukrainian government that Obama was reluctant to do. And then famously, just unbelievably, I mean, is this some funhouse mirror shit as an Empire Falls or what, where the man is impeached for temporarily holding up an arms deal to a Nazi-infested military in Ukraine, which, as Pat Buchanan said, is east of what we ever used to call Eastern Europe in the battle days of the Cold War. And this is the Ukraine, this region that's been under Russian dominance all of this time, and where Russian civilization essentially springs from in the first place. And where just, not that Russia should dominate these people. They deserve independence in whatever, degrees, sizes they can negotiate amongst themselves and whatever. But boy, if the Russians don't deserve to have dominance in Ukraine, then how in the hell do the Americans from way over here, how could we have a border dispute with Russia this far, 5,000 miles as the crow flies? I mean, if you want to take the long way around in a plane, it's, 7,000, 8,000 miles from here. And with a country that has the ability not just to hit back, but if it escalated to full-scale nuclear war, which essentially any nuclear war would almost certainly escalate to all the way nuclear war, they would kill all of us. They could wipe out every major city in America. And in fact, as Daniel Ellsberg has written, that's the Russian system, is that even if the Americans defeat them in a first strike and kill every last one of them, the computers are all set to launch everything they've got left anyway and kill us all anyway. That's they do have that strange love doomsday machine set up. So, the whole thing is completely bananas. And so I'm sorry, I'm just rambling so much, but to get to now where we are, where Biden's now in charge of the government, and he's talking tough, and his Secretary of State, who's got to be the most arrogant SOB since the last guy. Is he unbelievable or what? This Blinken, he's just dictating to the world all day, every day, while invoking human rights, which has just got to be the most just tone deaf and dumb and blind thing I've ever heard. But anyway, these guys, Biden and Blinken both have been essentially passing out these soft sort of war guarantees. We promise resolute support no matter what. And all of these keywords, like, what exactly does that mean in my dictionary of diplomatic language? What is resolute support? I mean, hell, that's the name of one of our wars right now. What does that mean when translated into the promise of the next one?
Or unwavering or whatever the hell.
And then, so now under Trump, and Biden has continued this, they had escalated bomber flights by B-52s in the Black Sea, the Baltic Sea, and the Sea of Okhotsk there in the Far East in order to test Russian air defenses over and over and over again. They've been provoking them with this. And then they had announced, quite loudly on the front pages of Antiwar.com, we're sending an enhanced sized Black Sea fleet in there, or they don't call it the Black Sea fleet, but our Mediterranean fleet, to go to sail into the Black Sea to make a show of force at a time when the Ukrainian military was building up near the eastern regions and threatening to take back not just Donetsk and Luhansk, but also Crimea. And you have the Russians building up reportedly on their side of the line. Of course, in the American media, the Russians are building up without any mention of who started what buildup and who's threatening to move which lines and break which peace deals, and all of these things. And so, and you know what? I got to admit, I'm behind on this. I really should go back and read all the different reporting about this. But as Ray McGovern wrote in his piece, Biden and Putin talked on the phone. And I don't know exactly who called who first or what, but essentially the way Ray told it was Putin told Biden that, listen, we don't want to fight here. We could end up in a fight. A fight. So come on, let's not do that, right? Yeah. And Biden said, you know what? You make a compelling argument there, Vlad, and decided to call off the Black Sea Fleet maneuver and instead sent them to Cyprus for repairs. And so, as Ray put it in his piece at antiwar.com, Biden and Blinken blink. Putin told them, hey, man, come on now. This is enough now, and don't do that. And they said, you know what? We were just trying to see what it would take to make you say that, but okay, and decided to back right back down. So now what does that mean for the future? I don't know. How much courage does this stand-up comedian turned sitcom comedian turned president of Ukraine have to get into a fight? How much support from the Americans does he think he has? Yeah. I mean, I don't think it was him, but it was one of his defense ministers or something had said, well, look, if the Americans and the European countries won't bring us into NATO, well, we'll just have to get nukes then. Yeah. Like, come on, man. We should not be doing business with these guys at all. I mean, business, yes, but I mean, between political governments, we should have no tie to them. We should negotiate in terms of all other things being equal, as they say, in terms of statecraft. We ought to have an absolute neutrality policy with Ukraine, the same way we treated Finland and Austria during the Cold War. We're just, you know what? NATO enlargement stops here. This is nuts. And then two more important points on this, and I promise I'll shut up. It's in the WikiLeaks. Thanks to Chelsea Manning and Julian Assange. You can read about this. It's our current CIA director, William Burns, was, I guess, I don't know if he was the ambassador to Russia or he was, some important position over there, under secretary of something or whatever the hell it was, working for the State Department at the time. And I think he was the ambassador at the time. Pretty sure he was. And he met with Sergei Lavrov. And Sergei Lavrov, the title of the thing is Niet means Niet.
Yeah.
And it's Lavrov telling him that, look, man, you guys trying to bring Ukraine into NATO, you're putting us in a bad position, a position we don't want to be in. And he's very diplomatic with his language, Sergei Lavrov, because he's a diplomat. But he's saying, listen, don't do this, William Burns. And tell them I said that, would you? And tell them that your impression is that I meant it. Okay? Come on now, right? And so that's what he did. He wrote back like, oh, geez, this Lavrov guy seems to really mean it when he says, like, yeah, no, don't. Really, don't. And then I actually screwed this up for any regular hearers of mine. You might have heard me get this footnote wrong, so I'm happy to correct it. It was actually not Lavrov in the Niet means Niet WikiLeaks. It was Putin to, I believe, a Norwegian minister, either way, but it was Putin himself who had said, we could be in Kiev in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And which by that he must have meant 1 week. I don't know who anybody thinks they're fooling. And you know what? I mean, look, I don't think he was saying, that's my plan, I'm going to Kiev. What he was saying was, you guys, stop telling me that Kiev is going to be a NATO capital, because I'm telling you that it's not.
Yeah.
Can you hear me calling? Like, what are we talking about here, guys? What are we doing? Sorry, that's a horrible 80s Cold War reference, man. Somehow I got that brainwashed into my brain there. Like, this isn't what we're doing, is it? Let's not.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm admittedly behind on the Ukraine thing. I haven't been following too closely what Zelensky's saying, although I did see their, like, army chief, the guy who runs the Ukrainian army, saying that, like, we could, be over there in the Donbas and fight, but he was really sounded like he was warning of, like, heavy civilian casualties and all this stuff. Like, we'd have to flood the thing with artillery and we'd have to, it would just be devastation. So it does sound like there are at least some voices there who are, because this is really dangerous. Like, this is a worry of mine, is that Ukraine will take the wrong signal from the USA that, like, yeah, go ahead and, launch some big offensive in the Donbas. And then next thing we know, like, I think the reports of Russian buildups and stuff might be overhyped and stuff, but they can certainly, send in special forces. They can certainly back those fighters in the Donbas. So that could, could be a real mess.
I'll tell you what, man, I read this article back years ago by Mark Perry, and it was about the contest between General H.R. McMaster and Colonel Douglas McGregor. And boy, it'd be nice if I could speak English during this interview. They're competing plans for what would we do in the event of war with Russia in Eastern Europe. Where would we send our tanks? How many of them? What would the shape of the units be? How would we deploy them? We're going to have these combat brigade teams, or we're going to have these, whatever you call the other one. And now McMaster used to serve under McGregor in Iraq War I, and then was promoted beyond him because he's a more political guy, and McGregor is more a brass tacks guy, I guess. But essentially, the entire Pentagon is relying on these two guys. Like, their plan, whatever's in that red folder, that's what McGregor put in there. And the blue folder is McMaster. Like, this is what we do in the event of, if Russia rolls into here, here, and here, we draw the line at Poland or whatever it is. They're the ones who decided how we do this. And if you've ever seen Colonel McGregor on Fox News, he's the kind of guy you take seriously when he says stuff. And he wrote this piece for the American Conservative last week, where he says, listen, at this point, we're getting, I think he says, we're getting to the point where war is becoming inevitable. Right? Like, he's trying to add a couple of weasel words here, but at the same time, he wanted the word inevitable to be in there. They're like, listen, the path we're on, this is wrong. We have to stop and not do this at all. Because if you think that what you're going to do is just bring Ukraine into NATO because, you said so, and the Russians won't be able to do anything about that because what are they going to do about it? Then, man, you don't know what you're doing. This is not right. And this thing should have been running on the top of the editorial page of the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal or something like that. I'm glad it was intact. But he was just scorching in the way that he talked about the political leadership in Washington, D.C. And in fact, he went on the Tucker Carlson show and talked about this as well. He said, listen, these people have no idea what real war looks like. And he said even, and this is the guy who was the hero of the big tank battle in Iraq War I, which is, armor on armor, as close as you could get to something like World War I or World War II, tanks out in the field somewhere kind of war like you would picture. And he was saying, even for people who fought in the Middle East, you don't have any idea what real war is. And in other words, the way he framed it, I think what he meant was he was including himself in that as an experienced warfighter. But the reason he knows better is because of what he's read, right? The reason he knows better is because what he knows about the real history of European wars and what real war looks like when major powers engage in it. And it ain't nothing like some TV show at all. You're talking about collateral damage doesn't even cut it at all, right? That term itself dies on the first day of engagement. There's so damn many people dead. It's just civilians laid waste is all it is. And just, absolute butchery, mechanized murder. You don't do that. Never even mind nuclear weapons even. And the way he was talking about it in that piece, it's like, here's a guy, like the whole phrase, like, boy, I ain't asking you, I'm telling you, or whatever. This is the guy you listen to. When this guy's telling you that, man, this is unwise. And look at the level of risk that you're taking. In fact, he says in the piece, he goes, the prevailing winds would blow all the fallout over Russia. And so they would be really reluctant to use nukes in a war in Ukraine for that reason. Even if they felt like they really had to, man, they'd be nuking themselves to such a bad degree too. And so maybe we could even keep it from going nuclear. But still, man, how many thousand sailors do you want to drown? How many tens of thousands, or hundreds or thousands of airmen you want shot down? Or, whatever brigades bombed with, I don't know, whatever long-range conventional missiles or whatever it is that the Russians can bring to bear in a real fight, even if it doesn't escalate to nukes. You'd have to be crazy to think that, what we need to do is we need to just push this line as much as we can, and we need to let them Russians know that, oh, no, we're the biggest dog, not you, even right on your own front porch. And no matter what, and we're going to keep this posture from now on, too. And screw you. To have that as America's long-term strategic, posture or whatever, however they call it, their plan for our relations with Russia for the medium term is completely insane. It's completely insane. And whether we're talking about Obama or Donald Trump or Joe Biden, the obvious answer is to bring Putin to Washington, D.C., feed him a nice steak dinner and make friends and tell him, look, you know what? Here's what we can cooperate on in terms of restricting nuclear weapons and, the new arms race, in terms of carving out who's definitely not adding which countries to each other's military alliance structure or whatever it is, and come to a reasonable compromise to last for the long term. This is crazy to think. It's not just nothing. It's something, right? That the red flag came down Christmas Day, 1991. Their flag is red, white, and blue now. And yes, Putin is a conservative, but he's not a Nazi. And no Russians are really not. Well, I guess there are some Russians that are very right-wing nationalists, but but mostly they're not, because the Great Patriotic War was to crush the Nazis. Whether that's a legacy of Stalin and communism is beside the point to a great degree, right? It was the Russian people and their friends in Eastern Europe who helped them, who defeated the Nazis. And so, in other words, Putin is right-wing, but he ain't that right-wing. And why pretend that he is? Why pretend he's Hitler when really he's Hindenburg, right? Why pretend we're dealing with the Nazis when we're not? We're dealing with the Weimar Republic. We're dealing with an essentially conservative Christian Catholic, or not Catholic, capitalist country that at the core level shares our basic interests and values, and that's not to say that Vladimir Putin isn't a gangster, but look who's talking, the people who run the U.S. government. Same thing with the Ayatollah. You could pick on the Ayatollah all day, but talk about a flawed republic. I don't know. they hold elections and have parliaments, and no, it's right. The Ayatollah picks who gets to run, and it's all very corrupt. But don't we have that? Where all sorts of faceless overlords choose who we're allowed to choose from long before we get a chance to choose anything at all. Everybody knows that. Give me a break.
That's right.
You know, so, you know, and I've written about this in different places, that wherever you can, you know, legitimately criticize the Russians for, you know, severe violent activity in Ukraine, where innocent people have been caught in their crossfire, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Or intervening in Syria, where, of course, no question, innocent people were killed in their bombing campaign there.
Yeah.
Then in both of these places, this is all in direct reaction, and I wouldn't say justified, but I would say inevitable reaction to American policies where we did not belong and should not have been doing what we were doing. Again, the status quo in Crimea and the Donbas had held since 1991, when the Soviet Union completely let Ukraine go altogether. Well, and ceased to exist thereafter. So it was American intervention that precipitated that entire crisis. Whether you approve of what they did or not, it literally was in reaction to what America had done there. And then, as John Kerry himself said, look, Russia intervened because they didn't want a Daesh government, that is an ISIS, Islamic Caliphate, Baghdadi government in Damascus. That's his own words, which is exactly correct. It wasn't the mythical moderates who were going to take over Damascus. If the Ba'athist government had fallen, they would have been taken over by either Jolani or Baghdadi. Right. And those were the two by far strongest horses in that race. And so Kerry goes, yeah, well, so what did the Russians do? They called our bluff. You know, he even said, we thought we could manage. We thought, we saw the rise of ISIS, and we thought we could manage. We thought we could use them to pressure Assad to step aside, which makes no sense at all, by the way. And then he says, but then, you know, he turned to Putin and asked for help, and Putin gave it to him. And so, and then, no, he says too, they're like, yeah, that didn't work. You know, it wasn't working. And instead he turned to Putin, and Putin didn't want to see ISIS take over Damascus. And so they intervened. In the way he says, if you listen to the leaked audio, Kerry's kind of taking Putin's side. He's like, well, what do you expect him to do in a situation like we put him in? You know what I mean? Is basically the way he phrases it himself.
It was two Syrian activists, right? That recording. He's trying to explain why we can't do more to, you know, put you in power, basically. Yeah, exactly right. And so, and listen, I talked with Chris Woods from Air Wars, and he says the difference in civilian casualties from American bombing in Raqqa versus Russian bombing in Aleppo is strictly a question of population density. Yeah. You cannot find, he says, I wrote about this recently too. I forgot where. Just in the book? I think it's in the book. Yeah. About the Battle of Raqqa, where the Air Force, and this is an Air Force colonel coined a phrase about it, I forget. But it was, you know, internal Air Force criticism. That, you know what we do is we go, look, we're so precise that we just bomb one corner of a house at a time. And we really only kill the guys we're trying to kill based on the intelligence we have. But we even attack from the southwest just to make sure that we don't hit the kitchen where we think the wife might be. And we only take out the back room where we think the men are, or where this kind of thing. And then through that, they rationalize the destruction of an entire city. And with precision, they tear down every house and every building, block by block by block, and just decimate the entire place and kill thousands and thousands of people. And they make it all, they rationalize it away with their looking at war through a soda straw, as Robert Gates would say, looking at it through a microscope of each little targeted strike. And by the way, this just came up in my brain as worth mentioning. There's a really great, nowadays, it's taken a while, but nowadays there's a pretty good community of anti-war veterans who are friends to the show now, you know, and appreciate this, you know, the antiwar.com angle on things. And there's one guy who is a Green Beret in Syria, and this would have been fighting with
in support of the YPG Kurds against ISIS in the East in the later days of the war there. And he said one time they bombed a house and the damn bomb was a dud and it didn't go off. And then a moment later, all women and children and other civil, I guess men, but all civilians came running out of the house.
Oh, God.
And he was like, gosh, boy, I can't unsee that, can I?
Right.
Wow, what are we doing over there? And so, and I only say that not to defend the Russians, but just to give the total context here, that because all the hype is, the Russians just mercilessly bomb the civilian populations there. So does America. Same war against the same enemy at that time, bombing ISIS and allied groups. Right. And as Chris Woods documents with absolute, as close as you can get science and statistics to all of this stuff, the Russians aren't any more or less ruthless than the Americans in prosecuting their air war. The difference in how many civilians die is not of which red, white, and blue flag is bombing them. It's what happens to be the population density in the towns that they're bombing at the time, period, full stop. That's it. Yeah. So, yes, they suck just as bad as us. And in reaction to an American policy that, frankly, is treasonous and always has been since 2011. When Prince Bandar, when it's in the Observer in the summer of 2011, Prince Bandar is sending jihadis off to Syria to fight. Well, we still had guys in Iraq through the end of that year fighting against those very same guys, Saudi foreign fighters, Zarqawi's guys, Al-Qaeda in Iraq. Right. That part of Iraq War II wasn't even all the way over for the USA yet. And it was already there in the Observer. It was already there in foreignpolicy.com. Who wrote it in foreignpolicy.com? John Hanna, Dick Cheney's man. Card-carrying neoconservative from the Jewish Institute for National Security Affairs. Wrote it in April of 2011 in Foreign Policy. Well, there you go. It's high treason. It's acting like it's the Reagan years, the Carter years, the Reagan years, the Bill Clinton years, which it was already treason by the Bill Clinton years. They started bombing and attacking America in 1993 with the first World Trade Center bombing. Clinton was still backing them through the 90s. But anyway, never even mind that in the 90s campaign. This is like pretending that September 11th never happened. It's like pretending that in Iraq War II, we didn't lose 4,000 out of 4,500 guys fighting the Sunni insurgency, the worst part of which was Al-Qaeda in Iraq, the suicide bomber brigades of Saudis and Syrians and Egyptians and others who came to fight under Zarqawi. And then while our guys are still wrapping up Iraq War II, at the very end there, they're already taking these guys' side on the other side of the line. And, back then at the time, I would go back and check the archives of me and Jason Ditz joking on the show about how we're still doing drone strikes in Iraq against what's left of AQI. ISI, the Islamic State of Iraq, they call themselves now. A group of just a few hundred guys left is all they got now, and almost inactive. And we're bombing them with drones. And me and Jason joking on the show that, we got to chase them across the border into Syria, where we can call them mythical moderates and make them heroes. I mean, this is in the summer of 2011.
Yeah.
Right.
Man. What didn't have to be, guys, I'm telling you what.
I guess that could have been another title for the book, Enough Already.
I was just thinking that. Yeah. That's exactly what I was going to say. Didn't have to be this way, but it was by Scott Horton. Yeah.
It's just it's a great book, Scott. It's just one absolute calamity after the next. Just when you think that they couldn't have botched the U.S. foreign policy anymore, they seem to do just about the only thing that could actually make it worse somehow. If they had just kept killing the terrorists the whole time, at least that would have been something. Even though it's kind of a threat that they perpetuate onto the American people. At least they're killing the right people in a way, in that way. But they've taken every side in different wars and conflicts, and it's been such a mess. I mean, I guess most of the stuff that I read in Enough Already, I'd already heard you say or read you write somewhere else, and I'm sure for Will is about the same. But the way you weave it all together, just it from what I'm able to explain to other people and have them understand, I'm sure they're going to get a lot out of reading this book, Scott. So it was absolutely awesome. Will, anything to say before we wrap up here?
No, I mean, I agree with what you said. The book is great. Everyone, please go out and check it out. Enough Already. That's about about all.
All right, Scott,
All right.
anything got plugged before we wrap up here?
Yeah, you guys can hear Kyle and Will at libertarianinstitute.org, where they are a big part of what we do over there. And so I'm really happy to be on you guys' show and happy to have you guys on the team. And Kyle, especially having you on the team at antiwar.com as well, has been really important to all of us for the last couple of years here. So thank you for that. And thank you both for having me on.
All right.
Thank you, Scott.